All right, part 2. Let's talk about the zigzag stitch and doing a straight line with zigzag stitch and keeping the same seam allowance or uniform seam allowance as well. Okay, so it is the same process, but the only difference is it's the same process as straight stitch, but the only difference is that the where your needle is positioned is a little bit tricky. Okay, it can be a little bit tricky. So you see how the needle for a zigzag stitch goes up and down, right? So with this, you want to have your needle positioned at the, whatever the position is for the left side of the needle, the left side of the zigzag stitch, that is where you're going to consider what your seam allowance is, okay? So if you look at this, and we're trying to do the 1/2 inch seam allowance, okay? Let me take it back here so you can, okay? So this is the furthest left that this zigzag stitch will go. Now, how do you know, or how do you know that it is going to be different lengths or a different position or whatever? It's because your stitch length is going to determine how far over to the left this is going to go. So that's why this seam guide is extremely useful, because it can tell you, hey, look, this is your 1/2 inch mark still with your zigzag stitch. And it doesn't necessarily change that much when you're doing the straight stitch, but it's always good to know that when you're doing zigzag, you want to go to the left, the furthest left, to determine your seam allowance. And so from that point, oops, I got it all messed up here. From that point, we know that it is still the 1/2 inch mark right here that we've been doing for the straight stitch, okay? So I just wanted to point that out, because that's one thing that I really didn't pay attention to when I started sewing is, how do I determine what the seam allowance is when I have a zigzag stitch? Well, like I said, you do the position of the zigzag that is furthest to the left, okay? And you use that to determine your seam allowance. All right, so it's the same, like I said, it's the same thing as going, sorry, I had to readjust myself in my seat. It's the same thing that you do when you do a straight stitch. You do not pay attention to the needle. You pay attention to the raw edge, okay? And you make sure that you are constantly adjusting your raw edge and keeping it along that line. Make an invisible line in your head right here. We got the seam guide right here that is helping us stay focused on the 1/2 inch seam, okay? So as you can see, all right, that is how you do a straight line for your zigzag, okay? So just keep that in mind. So you never pay attention to the needle. Well, not never to pay attention to the needle, but your main focus, the priority for your sew straight lines with things is your raw edge. With your curves is your raw edge. With your circles is a raw edge. Because if you understand this part, that when you're thinking about curves and all that stuff like that, a curve is just a bended straight line, okay? So make sure that you keep that in mind, and I'll do some sewing with curves as well, but I want you to master being able to pay attention and adjusting your fabric, you know, to where it stays lined up with that guideline, so that you can have uniform seam allowance, because that matters a lot when it comes to making garments and making projects that are made well. Okay, so thank you for joining me at Sew Crafting Good. We are creating with a purpose using our home sewing machines, and I want you all to be successful. So let me see those straight lines. Send them to me, DM them to me, or, you know, hashtag me or something, hashtag Sew Crafting Good, so that we can see all these straight lines, zigzag, straight, whatever. Have a great day.